This is going to be the last video linked to topic 7, looking at globalization and trade. This one we're going to call the terms of trade. Okay, now before we explain what this means, what I want to introduce you to first of all is a formula. So what we've got the index of export prices to the index of import prices. And what we do, we multiply it by 100. Okay, now what this is basically looking at is how many imports can you buy with your exports. So when you think about it, the money you earn to pay for your imports should come from the money that you as a country generate by selling your exports. Now, the simplest way of looking at this is to think about some make-believe data. So let's imagine we've got the year, we've got the exports, so X, and we've got the imports. Let's just draw a little table. So we're going to be looking at this over a 3-year period. So what we'll do, we'll establish a base year. So remember, the base year we set equal to 100 index points. Let's imagine that's going to be the current year, 2016. So we'll look at how it's going to change in 2017 and 2018. Now, base year, 100 index points. So what we're not saying is that exports are equal to imports or anything like that. It's just our sort of starting point, if you like. Let's imagine over the course of the next 12 months, the value of exports increased by 6 index points. Imports increased by 3 index points. And the reasons why these things will change in price, well, it's generally basically demand and supply. It's like anything. There's an increasing value of our exports for high demand regions across the world. They become more popular, they're more sought after, for example. And it's the same for imports as well. Right, okay, now what we've got here, well, let's do a calculation first of all. If I do the index of exports for 2017, it's 106. I divide this by the index of imports, 103, and I multiply by 100. And what that will give me is terms of trade of 102.9. Now just to make my point, let me go backwards a little bit and show you 2016. So obviously if we were calculating this, 100 divided by 100 times 100, it will give you 100 index points. Now what you'll notice is from 2016 to 2017, the index has increased. And what this basically means is that our terms of trade have improved. What this basically means is that for our exports now, we can now buy more imports than what we could do previously. Okay, so simple example would be to say that we can now buy 2.9% more imports for our exports than what we could do before. We've got an improving terms of trade. Now, let's think about what could happen in the following year. Let's imagine that the index value for our exports fell back to 103, but the imports kept on climbing up to 112. Again, if I use the formula, so index of export price 103 divided by the index of import price is 112, multiplied by 100, because I've already calculated this, so I'm not some kind of amazing mathematician here, I've got these numbers written down somewhere else. It will come to 91.9. Now what this shows me is that our terms of trade have worsened. What that basically means is that for our original volume of exports, we can only buy 91.9% of our imports. So our terms of trade have worsened. Now, across the world in recent years, Britain's terms of trade has improved, mainly because our imports tend to be sort of goods or visible things. The price of these tends to have fallen over time. Okay, so lots of commodities, for example, means our import prices tend to fall, but our export prices tend to hold their value quite well. These are your earnings from invisible earnings, services, for example. So when you think about it, if your export prices hold their value and import prices fall, It means for your exports, you can now, in effect, buy more imports. Now, the problem for many developing economies is that their terms of trade has worsened over time. That is because, well, think about from the UK's perspective, but the other way around. These economies will be reliant on exporting commodities, so land-based resources, and the value of these things tends to have fallen in recent years. But the things that they import, again, tend to hold their value better. So it means for their exports, they can now buy fewer imports. Now, it's something that I know we've been looking at in class. Which is better, improving or worsening terms of trade? It really depends how you look at it. So improved terms of trade, tot. Worsening terms of trade, or tot. Now, if your terms of trade improve, it means that for your exports, you can now buy more imports. So in fact, what that means is, if you think about it, that your exports have become more expensive across the world, and your import prices tend to be cheaper. If you get a worsening in terms of trade, it means that your exports will buy less imports, which is another way basically your exports now carry less value across the world, and your imports are in effect more expensive to buy. Now, let's think about what this could mean. If you have improving terms of trade, then it could be great in some respects that your imports are now cheaper. This could reduce cost-push inflation pressures. Okay, so it means that UK firms can now access cheaper raw materials from across the world, semi-finished goods, for example. Means that we can go buy petrol at the petrol station or food from the shop for lower prices. So it could be a great way of making the SRAS curve shift to the right. So SRAS1 out to SRAS2. Okay, so it could be a great way of easing inflation. But the problem with this is the impact on trade deficit. Okay, if your imports are in effect now cheaper, then it could lead to a growth in demand for imports. But at the same time, it could, in theory, be quite bad for your exports, which could lower export demand across the world, but make your imports more expensive. I beg your pardon, make your imports cheaper, which means you buy more of them. Now, when you have a worsening terms of trade, you can hopefully see it's the other problem, other way around this time. This could be great for trade. If your imports are now more expensive, then you'd like to think that there'll be a lower demand for imports. It might mean that people in your economy start to shift towards buying domestic goods and services. What it should also do over time is to increase the demand for your exports as they start to become cheaper across the world. Think about it from another economist's perspective. For their imports, they can now buy. For their exports, they can now buy more of your imports. So Britain's economy, if we had a worsen in terms of trade, they could see import demand start to fall over time and export demand start to increase. It might even enable an economy to establish a new absolute advantage. So it could lead to a growth in production in an economy. The bad point, though, will be cost-push inflation. If your imports are essential, you haven't got a domestic supply of them, and what it will basically do is mean you're still going to buy the things, but you've got to pay a lot more for them. They, in fact, start to become more expensive. So this time it could make the SRAS curve shift inwards, which will increase the cost of living, could lower demand across the economy, and lead to a lower output within the UK economy, which could, in theory, create a negative output gap.